On the top of Samach Omid Beis, Omer Rab Shimon in a price that we quoted earlier says that Dafka Achoso Hara'uya Kohen Gadol Mitame, that Kohen Hedjot is only Mitame to bury his sister if she's Ra'uya Kohen Gadol, but Ain Ra'uya Kohen Gadol, like for example an Almana or Gusha, Ain Mitame. So even though she was only an Arusa, but she received a get, that means she's Ain Ra'uya Kohen Gadol. She's a full-fledged Grusha. So how is it possible that Rab Shimon could have a ribui that a Kohen Hedge is allowed to be mitami to his achosa arusish and his garasha when she's ain't a real Kohen Gadol? And that was Rabbi Shimon's principle in the earlier Bryce, that afka ru'uya lekohen gadol mitamila. So the Gemara says shani hosam the Rabbi Rachmana hakrova. You're right. If not for the extra ribui hakrova, we would have activated the principle of Ein Aruya L'Kohen Gadol Ein Mitamila. And therefore, in the case of Arusa and his Garsha, she's a full-fledged Grusha, and she's excluded to a Kohen Gadol, and therefore the Kohen Hedjed is not Mitamila. But now that we have the extra word Akrova, that's a ribui to teach me that the Kohen is now allowed to be Mitami to his sister, because she is Krova Eila. After the Gerushin, she's Krova Eila. So the Gemara see Hachi, if you're right that a Kohen Hedjot is allowed to be Mitami to his sister, even if she's ain't a real Kohen Gadol, and that you derive from the Ribi of Krova, then why not derive the following conclusion that Mukas Eitnami Rabbi? We're going to be Marba the Kohen who can be Mitami to his sisters of Mukas Eitz, even though she's ain't a real Kohen Gadol. And that's going to be included on the word hakrova. She's krova elav. So why does Rabbi Shimon in the Brisa paskin that the Kohen Hedjot is not mitami to achoso if she's a mukas eitz? And the Gemara answers that the lashon yachid here is critical. Hakrova achas v'lo shtayim, she and not them. And she, who's Ein Real Kohen Gadol, can be Metamila, but not two of them. So there's no ribui for two krovos. And now we have to decide which krovo we should include and which we exclude. We have two options. We have Achos Arusish in his Garsha, and we have Achos Shimukas Eitz. Umar Isa. And the Gemara answers, Ha is Avi B'maisa, Ha lo is Avi B'maisa. In the case of Mukas Eitz, is Avid B'maisa, there's a Maisa passes. She had a Makkah, be also Makom, and she's not a Chosa B'sula. But in the case of Arusa, is Lois Avid B'maisa. Nothing in her body changed because of the Erisin. It's just this legal temporary status of being married, which is removed now through the get. And therefore, it's more logical, says the Gemara, to use the Ribui of Krova to be Mitame her, meaning his sister, who was an Arusa Niskasha, but rather exclude the case of Achosa Mukas Eitz because it's Avid B'mais. So the Gemara now tries to clarify the opinion of Rabbi Yossi in terms of Mukas Eitz and its derivation. Rabbi Yossi, Midashavke Lebar Zuge, he left his Ben Zug. You know, at the beginning of the Brisa, we saw Tan Rabbanan Achosa Arusa, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Omer Mitamila. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, Omer Eina Mitamila, in the case of an Arusa. And yet, when it gets to the end of the Brisa and addresses the issue of Mukas Eitz, Rabbi Shimon is quoted here, Sheina Mitamila and Mukas Eitz. And the din is not even brought down in the name of Rabbi Yossi, who's the Ben Zug of Rabbi Shimon. So Rabbi Yossi is dropped here with regard to Arusa. No, I mean to say, let me get that straight. Again, Rabbi Yossi was the Ben Zug of Rabbi Shimon with regard to Arusa, Achosa Arusa. But when we get to Mukas Eitz, Rabbi Shimon says Eina Mitamila, and Rabbi Yossi says Well, I mean, his name is omitted. So we assume by process of omission that he would not accept this din of Rabbi Shimon says Edom Etam, of Rabbi Shimon says Edom Etamila. Michlal. Now we have to define the Shita Rabbi Yossi, the Mukas Eitz, Rabbi Meir Smirle. Rabbi Meir was the one who was matir a coin hedjo to be metame to achosu Mukas Eitz against Rabbi Shimon, who says also Tamila. And Rabbi Yossi agrees and adopts the position of Rabbi Meir, and he's matir a coin hedjo to be metame to achosu Mukas Eitz. Is Minolan. From whence did Rabbi Yossi derive this din that he can be metame to a kohen hedger can be metame to a mukaseitz achoso mukaseitz? And the Gemara answers Rabbi Yossi derived this from the pasuk v'lachoso absula krova elav asher lo hoiso leish lo yitama. And the implication is that he can be metame his achoso asher lo hoiso leish, meaning she did not have a relationship with an ish, and that was the drasha Rabbi Meir. But mukas eitz fits into the category of asher lo hoiso leish because she never had havaya al yidei ish, only al yidei eitz, and therefore the kohen hedger could be metame lo. So the Gemara says that these words lo hoiso leish are already taken; they're already used up. Afikte, Rabbi Yossi already derived a limud from these words of lo hoiso leish to exclude the case of arusa. It's not metamila because she was hoiso leish. So how can he now use the same three words lo hoiso leish as a ribui to include mukas eitz in the heter of a kohen hedjo to be metami to achoso? And the Gemara says that really there are two different drushes here. Chad, as far as excluding a kohen hedger from being metami for the burial of his sisters and arusa, that we derive me lo hoisa. She did not have havaya, whereas achoso arusa had havaya. The chad and the other libud to be marbetum in the case of mukaseitz, that's me leish, from the fact that only his sister had havaya al yidei ish, a relationship with a human being, ain't a metame. But if it was a al yidei eitz, she had an injury, is metame law. Now let's go back to the drasha of Rabbi Shimon. Elov l'rabos bogeres habogeres. He's metame to his sisters of bogeres, and that's derived from Elov. So when we ask for Omer Rabbi Shimon earlier, we had Rabbi Shimon who took the pasuk of who each of b'sula yikach, and it says b'sula with the extra yud and not b'sula, to darshan that she doesn't need all her b'sula. The kohen gadol is allowed to marry a bogeres even though kolsa b'sula. And if it would have said b'sula, apparently, then bogeres would be excluded because she doesn't have all of b'sula. And now that we darshan b'sula without any extra yud, and we interpret as besula shlema mashma, that she has to have a besula shlema, not a bogeres. So now that it says lachosa besula, the meaning of that phrase lachosa besula means he can be metame only if she's a besula shlema, not a bogeres. So how do you now turn around and use the word elov to be marbel bogeres in the case of tumah? And the Gemara answers, "Taimadi nami mehasa." Even the understanding of Rabbi Shimon, when he derives that psula without the extra yud means psula shlema, is mehacha. He derives it from this parsha of Tumas Kohen Lachosa. The Darish Hachi darshans in the following way: the Elov l'Ravos Habogeres. From the fact that the Torah needed an extra word Elov to darshan and permit a Kohen to be metame to his sisters of Bogeres, Michlal, the Besula, if we only had the word Besula without the Elov as a ribui, then Besula Shlema Mashma Bogeres would be excluded. So therefore we needed the Torah to be Marbe Bogeres with the word Elav. And therefore, there's no question how can we darshan Elav to allow Tumim Bogeres. After all, she's not a Basula Shlema, but since the din of Basula means Dafka Basula Shlema, we're going to need the Ribui to allow the Kohen Hedjo to be Mitami to a Bogeres. And here in the Masifta, he has a little bit of a chart as an overview of the various shitas of the Tanoim as far as when a Kohen is allowed to be Mitame and when he's not, in the case of Achosa. So he's got Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, that in the case of an Arusa, again, everything is Achoso. He is Mitame. In the case of Arusa Sheniskarsha, he is Mitame, but in the case of Anusa, not Mitame because she's not a Basula, but in Mukaseitz, he is Mitame, Bogeres, he is Mitame. And that's Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. So they have Hakrova L'Rabos Arusa, so he is Mitame. And then we had Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, who don't distinguish between Arusa and Arusa Sheniskarsha, and he's allowed to be Mitame law. And L'chos HaBasula is to exclude Anusa. She's not a Basula, but Isha Shalo Hoysel Ish means that only if she was Hoysel Ish is she excluded from Tumah, and that's a Mukaseitz, who's not excluded Ish. She's not under the category of Hoysel Ish. And finally, in the case of Bogeres, we have the Elif to be Marba Bogeres. Then we have the Shita of Rabbi Yossi. Then in the case of an Arusa, she's not Mitame because Asher lo Hoysel Ish, Prat le Arusa Shoysel Ish. Rabbi Yossi agrees with Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda that in the case of this Garsha, we have a ribu of Krova to be marba that there is Tumah. It's permissible in the case of Arusa and this Garsha. And Rabbi Yossi, of course, agrees that in the case of Anusa, she's not a Basula, she's Eina Mitame. And Rabbi Yossi agrees, albeit for a slightly different reason, but that Mukaseitz and Bogeres are included in the head of the leniency of being Mitame to Achoso. And in the case of Mukaseitz, he has a ribuy of Leish. In the case of Bogeres, he has Elov, L'Rabos HaBogeres. And finally, Rabbi Shimon Shita is that, like Rabbi Yossi, in the case of Arusa, Asher lo hoysa prat la Arusa shoysa leish, he agrees with all the other shitos that in the case of Arusa shenis garsha, there's a ribuy of krova. He agrees with Rabbi Yossi in the case of Anusa she'ena mitame, and that we said was a universally accepted shita as far as Anusa is concerned. She's out of the picture as far as Tumas Kohen Hedjo. But with regard to Mukas Eitz, here's where Rab Shimon has his own shita lechumra of Eina Mitame, because he understood Lachosa Basula to exclude a Mukas Eitz who doesn't have Basula. He doesn't accept the ribuy of La'ish that we saw earlier in Rab Yosef. But he agrees that in the case of Bogeres, we have the ribuy of Elov, and all the Tanoim unanimously agree that the Kohen Hedger will be Mitame to Achoso HaBogeres. Now, Kohen is not allowed to marry a Zona, as the Torah says in Emor Isha Zona Mechalolo Yikachu. And for the same matter, he's not a Kohen, he's not allowed to marry a Giores, as we'll see in the Mishnah on the next Amud, Ein Zonel Giores Umeshuchreres. So in our sugya, we're going to record a machlokes between Rab Shimon and Chacham as far as Giores is Gaira Bekatnusa Pochos Mishol Shonim V'Echa, which means that from the time that she was Ru'uya Labia, she was already a Jewish girl. So is a Kohen allowed to marry her? Do we say that since she's a Giora, she's excluded? Or do we say that the reason for Yores is because she's Bechezkas Zona, but here she was less than 3 years old when the Gerus took place? Tanya, we have a brisa. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai Omer, Ki Yores. Well, I see we're running out of time here. So let's pick up this brisa, Mirza Shem, tomorrow. Okay, we'll make a note of it.